The world, Article 18, the universal right on freedom of religion or belief, is a violated right, which is why we must thank Baroness Foster of Aghud Rumsey for initiating this short debate. 80% of the world has a religious faith, and people of all faiths, as the Right Reverend Prelate has just reminded us, are persecuted. The noble Baroness reminded us that this is a great week for Christianity with Easter, but it's a great week for all monotheistic religions, with Jews having just celebrated Purim and Muslims celebrating Ramadan. But what singles out Christians is that 350 million of them, 1 in 7 in 144 countries, are persecuted in every country where Article 18 is breached. 13 Christians are killed each and every day because of their faith. The Times said of our indifference that we had become spectators at the carnage. Jonathan Sacks once said, I quote, "The persecution of Christians is one of the crimes against humanity of our time, and I'm appalled at the lack of protest it has evoked." We talk about persecution as if it ended with Nero and the lions in the Colosseum, but it's one of the most shocking untold stories of our time. And although the noble Lord, the Minister, Lord Ahmed, and Fiona Bruce, Member of Parliament, the Prime Minister's Special Envoy on FORB, a role which I too hope we will legislate to make permanent, although they've striven to implement the Truro Review recommendations, the rising tide of visceral hatred does continue to rise. This is foolish, given the economic link between countries that respect Article 18 and prosperity, stability and harmony. Foolish, given the link between persecution and displacement, now at a record 114 million people. My Lords, I want to say a word about China and then highlight 2 Commonwealth countries. There's been a frenzy today about China's cyber attacks in 2021, one of which was against me, along with sanctions imposed 3 years ago. Today, the Deputy Prime Minister told the House of Commons that the response was robust and swift. I dread to think what leisurely or weak would have looked like. There are still no sanctions against state officials, nothing to match the 47 imposed on Hong Kong by the US, and wholly incommensurate with 1 million Uyghur Muslims subjected to genocide, the brutal oppression of Tibetan Buddhists, the crimes against Falun Gong, and the persecution of Christians, including the imprisonment of Protestant pastors, demolition of churches, the jailing of the Christian journalist Shan Zhang, who went to Wuhan to ask awkward questions about the origins of COVID, or the trial in Hong Kong of Cardinal Zen, and now Jimmy Lai, a deeply committed Christian. I'd like to know from the noble Lord the Minister whether the Foreign Secretary will be raising those issues with the Chinese ambassador when he's summoned to meet him tomorrow. Turning to Pakistan, tomorrow as co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Pakistan Minorities, I'll chair an inquiry into discrimination and persecution. I recently met representatives of the over 1 million workers employed like slave labour in brick kilns in Pakistan, overwhelmingly Christian. Often illiterate, they rarely earn enough to subsist, much less clear the loans that they're forced to take out, becoming bonded labour. Debts have been passed down to children from one generation to another, and workers are abused at the whim of their owners, with Hindu and Christian women and girls particularly vulnerable. Tomorrow we'll be hearing first-hand accounts from victims. Only last week, 2 Christian sanitary workers, Asif Masih, 25, and Shan Masih, 28, lost their lives while undertaking the hazardous task of cleaning a choked sewage line due to the absence of proper protective gear, and it's not the first tragedy of its kind. On February the 14th, the noble Lord the Minister told me our aid to Pakistan for this year is £41.5 million, rising to £133 million next year. How much of that will be used to promote the rights of religious minorities? When did we last speak to the Pakistan government about FORB? When did we last engage the Commonwealth General Secretary about FORB? And which takes me to Nigeria. 82% of all Christians killed for their faith last year were in Nigeria. 4,998 Christians were slaughtered, 200 murdered during Christmas services in 2023. Open Doors reports, I quote, "Christians in Nigeria continue to be terrorized with devastating impunity by Islamic militants with abductions for ransom, sexual violence and death, leaving a trail of grief and trauma." Last November, on Red Wednesday, when the FCDO was lit in red to commemorate the persecuted, thanks to Aid to the Church in Need, I met Dominic and Margaret Atta, survivors of the Boko Haram Pentecost attack on St. Francis Xavier Church in Owo, when 40 were murdered. Margaret's legs were blown off. Their bishop, Jude Aragodade, at a meeting here which I chaired, lacerated a head of state for attributing the attack to climate change, a foolish simplicity repeated by some of our own officials who seem illiterate when it comes to extremism and construct false narratives. Margaret wanted to know why no one has been brought to justice. I asked the Noble Lord the Minister that, and he told me in reply, "We continue to call for those who committed this attack to be brought to justice and held to account." Needless to say, my lords, they haven't been. Just like the abductors of Leah Sharibu, who was abducted on February the 19th, 2018 by ISIS West Africa from the Government Girls Science and Technical School in Dapchi, Yobe State. Leah was told to convert, was raped, impregnated and enslaved. She is still held captive. I promised Rebecca, her mother, I would lose no opportunity to raise her case. Following a recent meeting with the Africa Minister, have our officials followed that up? What are the Nigerians doing to get her released? Where is the ICC inquiry into potential crimes against humanity, against the Christian minority in Nigeria? And those preliminary inquiries concluded 3 years ago. How much will Nigeria receive in ODA next year? What percentage will be used to promote FORB? And when did we last raise that with the Commonwealth? More believers are killed for their faith in Nigeria each year than everywhere else in the world combined. In the face of these deadly violations of a universal right, our indifference and our silence is simply not acceptable.
Yeah.